Chapter 12: Becoming a law enforcement professional. Learning objectives: understand the benefits of racially balanced and integrated police departments. Describe the advantages that exist for law enforcement agencies that hire and retain more women. List the steps and candidates requires that usually involve police officer selection. Summarize the federal guidelines and regulations related to hiring practice. Discuss what length and purpose of probation are. Understand what primary purpose of a union is. Explain what accreditation is. Identify the 3 key elements of professionalism. So when you look at officers' desired qualities: ability to work under pressure, accept direction, solve problems, should have self-respect, ego control, initiative, integrity, leadership skills, should use good judgment, be considerate, compassionate, dependable, enthusiastic, ethical, fair, flexible, honest, humble, industrious, intelligent, logical, motivated, neat, observant, persuasive, physically fit, and prompt. So when you look at these things right here, this is telling you one of the reasons why law enforcement agencies are having problems recruiting people, because a lot of people can't meet this standard. They could be the best, nice people in the world, but they may not be physically fit. They could be somebody who's physically fit, but may have some issues with their integrity and their character. So one of the things you want to be able to show when you get law enforcement officers, you want to recruit people who have ethical standards, physical fit, and able to think on their feet and a lot of different things. This is one of the reasons you have problems with agency recruitment, because a lot of people just don't meet the criteria. So recruiting for diversity. So fosters community relations and increases police effectiveness, women and minorities. One of the things that we've proven statistically in this country, when you have a police force and it does not look like their community and does not represent the community or have anybody on there who looks like somebody in their community, you can run into a problem with the us and them thing. Experience and stats show that when you are policing communities, you need people from those communities, people who understand those communities, people who speak their language, understand their culture, to also be able to police in those communities. Not saying that you only got to have those kind of people, but you need some of them. You need women and minorities. You need people, because I heard a statement once put out one time by the Attorney General of the United States. He said, in order to police America effectively, you need to look like America. And what he was saying is this: if we look like America, we can police America, and it could eliminate a lot of problems that some of the agencies were having with a us and them type mentality. And if you look at it historically, law enforcement was a field that women and minorities were not welcome in. So that is still a negative stigma still associated with that when it comes to recruiting within certain communities. The selection process. The selection process is different. It's not like getting a job at Microsoft or Apple or IBM or Walmart or Target or Ford Motor Company. This is a very different thing. It's a very extensive process and it involves a lot of steps. One of the reasons that you have an attrition rate that's kind of high is people who may qualify, who meet the minimum qualifications, they get into the hiring process and they get washed out at some point in time in the process in one of these steps. So the first thing you have is a formal application and resume. That's to determine if somebody meets the qualifications. Next thing they'll do is they'll do written or video examination. A lot of times agencies, they'll do written. Want to find out, can this person read and write legibly? Physical fitness feat. So you want to go out and to find out if a physical fitness test, if you have people who can actually meet basic qualifications. You have to have a minimum cutoff, because law enforcement requires people to do things that's physical in nature, to include sometimes apprehend suspects, run them down, fight them, or whatever else to subdue them. Psychological examination. You want to make sure that you have people who are mentally stable coming into your organization. If you give people who have psychological issues badges and guns, I can show you your violence associated with police brutality, shootings, and a lot of other things will go sky high, because you're putting people who are not mentally sound in positions where they got to make split-second decisions. at least one oral interview. Usually with the oral interview, that's usually done by a panel, at least 2 to 3 members. Usually one executive level, one senior level, one middle level, and maybe one police officer to conduct this interview. And those are usually behavioral type interviews. Tell me about a time when you had a situation like this. What did you do and how did you handle it? What was the results? The background information. The background information is done to ensure that you're bringing people on who don't have skeletons in their closet, i.e. such as they're looking for arrest, convictions, they're looking for drug usage, they're looking for character references, they look at your, if you went to college, they're looking at your school transcripts, they may talk to your neighbors to try to determine, are you of sound moral character and above and have integrity with no skeletons in your closet. Medical examination. People who take these jobs have to be medically sound. So if you have people who have bad knees and elbows, bad vision, or bad backs and things along those lines, they're not going to pass the medical exam. One of the reasons why is because this job is physically demanding. And if you bring somebody in who's already physically compromised, they're not somebody who's going to be able to, their body will not hold up for a 20-year law enforcement career. And subsequently, you may end up paying for somebody to go out on disability. So we'll look at bona fide occupational qualification. All requirements must be clearly job related. So you want to be able to state what the job requirements are. Everybody knows what they are, and the requirements must be clearly job related. So you can't go in and stick things into a job qualification that's not part of the job to try to weed out people. For instance, if you wanted to weed out women, you could stick into the job qualification that, you know, everybody must be able to lift 100 to 120 pounds above their head. Well, yeah, that would get you a fair share. It would get some guys, but it would definitely just about wash out all the females. So you can't do that. The Equal Employment Opportunity Act. So this act was basically established, and it was redone and updated in 1972. It basically says you can't discriminate against people based on race, creed, color, religion, national origin. And this is something that governs federal as well as state and local agencies. Affirmative action. This was back in 1973, and this is basically when you had special endeavors to try to recruit minority and women or people from underrepresented groups. And so you had things such as, things as reverse discrimination. You see things that come into play now. So you can't do these types of things when it comes to trying to bring people in. Americans with Disabilities Act. This basically says that when you have individuals who are disabled but they are qualified, then they may apply for jobs for employment within these fields. So that's some of the things that you may look at. And I'll give you an example. If you may have somebody who may have a slight disability, but there's a job that they can actually apply for within the police department. Maybe they can't be a police officer, but they might be able to work at a police lab or something. All law enforcement positions in the U.S. that I'm aware of has this thing right here called the probationary period, which is usually a trial period. Most that I've heard of are either between 1 to 3 years. And what that is if you bring somebody into law enforcement as an officer, you have a period, and they've gone through all the training, and they're actually on the job. You have a probationary period in which if they cannot perform their duties up to par, then they can be terminated without cause. Once these officers get past the probationary period, particularly on the federal level, it gets much harder to dismiss them. Training and civil liability. So you have training in civil liability, and the reason that you have to have training for officers and stuff because their civil liability can be incurred. If you have people who do not get the proper training, failure to train can lead to litigation. And for instance, give you an example, if you have somebody who actually is trying to apprehend someone and they had not been properly trained and they do something and it actually injures someone because they were not trained properly, you're looking at litigation or lawsuit. Civil liability for injuries sustained during this training. So you have civil liability that can be associated when it comes to training, when somebody does not do what they're supposed to do. The firefighter's rule and assumption of risk. This is something that's been around for a very long time. And it basically says that if a firefighter is injured, if a person starts a fire and a firefighter is injured in the process of trying to extinguish that fire, then the individual criminal cannot be sued. It's not civilly liable. Assumption of risk means by virtue of you being a firefighter and being a law enforcement officer, you have assumed a certain type of risk because of the job that you chose to do. Increased rates of staff turnover. So when it comes to retention, retention refers to basically keeping your people. One of the things you want to do is it comes to how you're retaining folks. And when you see increased rates of staff turnover, a lot of times that's indicative of signs that something's afoot, something's not quite right. This is a lot of times you see this in police departments where you have low morale and things along those lines. Why officers leave? This is a big one right here. Bad bosses and bad pay. A lot of times police officers find out, you know what, I'm working for a bad boss and, I'm not making that much and I have a college degree. I can go somewhere else and make a lot more money and be in a lot less danger and not have to deal with the idiot boss like I have now. Elimination of sexual harassment. This is one of the things that was really big. Because law enforcement is a predominantly male-dominated industry, when women start coming into the field, one of the things that was a major problem was sexual harassment. It is much better today, but it still exists. But this is one of the reasons that women, when they came into the field historically, they didn't stay because they dealt with a lot of that. Stress and burnout. When you have law enforcement officers who are involved in stressful situations and they're constantly working and they're constantly getting called out, on things like critical incidents, burst stress, split-second syndrome, you have PTSD. These things kick into play. And as a result, law enforcement officers end up getting burned out. And I've seen this before when they get burned out. And a lot of times they get burned out. Some of the things that you can notice too is they can get kind of reckless. Complaints can kind of go up. They can kind of get short with people or be kind of disrespectful or short with folks unnecessarily. So all these things have to be addressed. And the one thing that I really would talk about is PTSD. Normally, when we think of PTSD, we think of soldiers and military people who've been to war. Well, law enforcement officers, some of them work in areas where they're dealing with high crime, violence, assaults, and death and mayhem, and they see it on a weekly basis. Sometimes some of them develop PTSD, and some of them actually are no longer able to keep working in their job because of that. When you're looking at retention, some of the things you want to do is offer training to your folks where you're communicating with them, give them proper training, get feedback from them to find out what's going on. Not what you think is going on, what really is going on, and how do they feel about their working conditions and everything, their promotions and everything else. And give recognition. Recognition is needed. Bottom line is, when you have people doing a good job, officers, let them know they're doing a good job, but most importantly, let others know that they're appreciated and they're doing a good job. Now, in a lot of law enforcement agencies, state and local, you have unions. And unions are basically where you have police officers union, where it's a union basically to try to protect the officers. And they have collective bargaining agreements and stuff. So officers seek this to protect their interests. So if an officer gets in trouble and gets terminated for his job, the first thing he'll do is reach out to his union to get a representative to represent him in the legal proceeding or the administrative proceeding against him. Now, right to work laws grant states the authority to determine whether workers can be required to join a union or can keep their jobs without becoming union members. So some states in the United States are right to state laws, and they grant the states the authority to determine whether workers can be required to join a union or not. And in some states, you can't. Collective bargaining. When you see this a lot of times, this is on behalf of police officers. A lot of times the organizations that do that for them is the Fraternal Order Police or the National Association of Police Organizations, where they come in to work on new contracts for the police officers, maybe try to get them higher pay and better benefits. This is something that's very common. when you're looking at local law enforcement. It's called moonlighting. This is when they have part-time jobs. And another term for it's called off-duty. They refer to them as off-duty jobs while fulfilling obligations full-time. So they have a full-time job, but because they have a full-time job as a police officer, then they can actually be employed part-time, they say, as a security guard for a restaurant. And the restaurant pays them an hourly rate to do that. So a lot of times, this is how local police officers makes their extra money throughout the year, is doing the moonlighting or off-duty jobs. This can be a source of controversy because depending upon where the police officers may be working at, sometimes it may be viewed as somewhat maybe controversial, the type of facility, the business it is. And sometimes too, there's been situations where within the police departments there's been controversy because only certain people seem to get the off-duty. When they get these off-duty assignments, they're usually assigned or designated through the police department, not police officers going out and finding them on their own. And these also has to be approved through the police department. So you have standards outlined by CALEA. And CALEA is the Commission of Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. I'll talk a little bit more about that here. So with CALEA, you have 5 phases for accreditation. So all law enforcement agencies, local law enforcement agencies, when you look at it, they have to be accredited law enforcement agencies. And that means they have to do certain things in order to say that they are a law enforcement agency. And the agency is accredited, and then it can start accrediting their officers by virtue of them being employed there. So you have to have them enrollment process where they bring them in. They tell them, exactly what's needed there. Self-assessment, the things that they have going on that CALEA says they need to have. On-site assessment, going into the different departments and units within the departments. A commission review, they have to go through that to get the accreditation. Maintaining compliance and recreditation. So maintaining compliance and recreditation every so many years they have to go through. CALEA benefits greater accountability, reduced risk and liability exposure, stronger defense against civil lawsuits, staunch support from government officials, increased community advocacy. So being part accredited by CALEA does a lot. To me, it doesn't make sense for a local law enforcement agency not to be accredited by CALEA because realistically, the pay is going to be worse. You have more exposure when it comes to liability, and you don't have the support of government officials, and you also get increased community advocacy because they know there's a certain level of professionalism that the organization has. Police professionalism, the 3 key elements of professionalism. Specialized knowledge. They must have specialized knowledge, professionalism when it comes to police, how they do the business, what they do, and you have certain people within the department who do certain things. So they have specialized knowledge as they need. Autonomy. They must have enough autonomy to make decisions about how they conduct their business. That is a good thing. All police departments are maintained. Give you an example. If you have a major city police department and a small town police department, they need to have autonomy to make decisions about how they do their policing in their community. And each community is different. Service ideals. When you have service ideals, when you look at providing, how you go about providing service to your community. There's an ideal way to go about doing it, and there's the standard, the blue standard, and each organization will have a service ideal for their unit situations, for their communities, and for their types and their size police departments. That concludes this chapter.